I have one more question, if we have time, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
This pertains to, there's a lot of changes always downtown, but one recent one that's been happening is the Economic Improvement District. And last night, City Council, I guess, voted to postpone the decision to go forward with that. It would mean imposing a tax on downtown property owners, which the money would go to promote marketing, promote the new organization, Go Downtown. This is a pointed question. I would like to know, do you think the process of establishing this economic improvement district was fair, and do you support it? Well, let's start with Mrs. Dickey.
Do you mean in terms of how they notified the businesses of what was going to happen and then allowed to provide for input? Is that what you meant in terms
Certainly
of the process
yes,
that
that's
way?
part of the process.
Yeah, I do think that's a fair way to seek the input from the businesses. I understand that there was some confusion, and so that's why the vote was delayed, to allow a business that hadn't had proper notification to be able to provide their input. And what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
Well, it was the process, but do you support establishing a new tax for property owners downtown?
In this case, I do, because as I understand it, it's just for 3 years, and in 3 years it will go away, and it will, and so in the meantime, I think that will help provide some much-needed improvements downtown.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Well, I think part of it is describing the process. It's somewhat convoluted. This is not a tax you vote for. This is a tax you would vote against in order not to have happen. It's a kind of a backward system, and that, I think, creates in itself a bit of confusion as it's talked about. It's the nature of the way economic improvement districts are set up. But it also, because it is a remonstrance system, it's one where if 33% said no, it wouldn't occur. You have to be absolutely assiduous in your care that it is fair and that particularly notification is done correctly. And what occurred last night was a realization that, at least in the case of one property, they weren't notified. And unfortunately for those who handled this, it's one of the biggest properties downtown. It was the Equitable Center, which kind of leaves you wondering, well, how about the small guy? Did he get notice? Did the individual who owns a piece of Salem Center get notice? Did, you know, the small building over on Cottage Street at the very edge of this get notice? And I think there is some concern, and I believe that the city staff is taking a very close look at it. And I think that that kind of question is what builds into your previous question, where you have a fractured downtown. Because if people don't feel this was done right and they're being taxed, you will have one more group heading out saying, look, I told you so. This was not done fairly. This was done on the cheap. It was done on the sly. I mean, I think we have to be so careful on a thing like this. The other question of whether or not a broad-based tax in a local community, an EID, should be allowed, yeah. If a community wants it and they're fully supportive, or they're supportive hopefully beyond 67%, and they want to invest in their own development and their own future, this has been a common economic development tool in Oregon. But you've got to be so careful that this reflects that and isn't a reflection of a smaller group that is pushing it very hard. And downtown is particularly tricky because you have some very big landowners that are able to, sort of accomplish a substantial portion of the 67% by their silence. And it makes it that much more difficult for the smaller property owner to have their voice reflected. And if they don't think it's fair, I think we have problems. So I'm very pleased the council took the decision it did last night to kind of stop, catch our breath, make sure everything was done right, and particularly for the one we know for sure was left out, the Equitable Center, accommodate their ability to say yay or nay to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Do you think that the process has been fair, and do you support it?
I am, I mean, the process by its nature, when it says you have to, that you vote no, you don't vote yes. And it's not, you don't, you know, it's only, so a non-vote is like a yes vote. Seems a very odd process, but apparently that's the way the state law is set up. I think that the vote should have been by silent ballot, or by ballot, you know, and anonymous. Owners should not have to be known, because I think that has been an issue here, that people have not felt comfortable saying no because they just didn't feel comfortable saying no, and I think that might have been an issue. I'm also concerned that downtown receives a great deal of money from downtown urban renewal. There is a parking fund. There's a leaseholders fund for the leased spaces in the parking structures that are rented out. And all of those, I would like to see, before I would support a new tax, I would like to see how those monies are being used and whether they're being used in a way that I think is consistent with downtown development and with the uses in the community.
Thank you, all three of you.
Okay,
Back to you,
thank
Cliff.
you, AP.